Alright, so today it's time for a top-level match of professional StarCraft 2. Originally, I was only gonna cast game number 1 of this Best-of-5 series, but then I said, you know what, screw it, I'm just gonna cast the whole series because I can. Spawning here in the top left-hand corner in game number 1, that's on the map of Romanticide. Playing with the blue Zerg drones, we're looking at none other than Serral's main hatchery. His opponent in the opposite corner with the red Protoss pieces from Germany, he goes by the name of ShoWTimE. Alrighty, so let's just leave it at the fact that game number 1 has been making its rounds around the internet. Alright, you'll see what I'm talking about here in just a little bit as this game progresses. So, like I said, originally I was only going to cast this very first game. But you know what? Like, let's watch the rest of it as well, because I actually, I watched a bunch of these games. I don't think I've seen all of the maps, but I did see a couple of these games, and I remember them being a lot of fun. So, I'm sure that if you enjoy StarCraft, especially high-level StarCraft, you'll get a kick out of this one. Now, of course, Serral, in case you're unfamiliar by now, the guy's very good at StarCraft, widely considered to be the best player on the planet. ShoWTimE, he is one of the most defensive Protoss players. His nickname is D-Mauer, for very good reason. He's very good at just simply not dying to stupid stuff, which is honestly one of the main criteria for going up on the ladder. Like, if you're a ladder player, either you're the one doing the stupid stuff, right? You know what I'm talking about. I don't need to explain what the stupid stuff is. Or you're the one trying to defend the stupid stuff. Generally speaking, I think it's better to be the one that's defending the stupid stuff and the one like who's not trying to die to stupid stuff, just because it will give you more long-term satisfaction and improvement. That being said, I mean, you can go pretty far as well, just playing very, very cheekily. Now, I brought it up in one of my previous videos. Mr. Serral has been mixing it up a lot more recently. So Serral was very well known as well as the kind of guy who would never die to stupid stuff. These days, though, he's doing a little bit of it himself as well. This is one of those builds that's probably inferior. Like, if you run the math and your opponent knows how to defend it perfectly, this is probably not an efficient build. As you can see how calmly and how collectively ShoWTimE defended that. But it's one of those situations where you're basically banking on the fact that your opponent is going to be less good at the follow-up than you are, right? So, I mean, ShoWTimE has definitely been grinding out these kind of games, but it's just to, like, throw your opponent for a loop, especially in a best-of-5 series. If ShoWTimE decided to open up even more greedily, this could be a problem for him when your opponent just plants down a hatchery right over there. And it's just to keep your opponent in check, and I actually really like it. I think it's one of the things that Serral should be doing a lot more. And, well, like I said, he's been doing it quite a bit, especially over the last couple of months. I think one of the worst traps you can fall into if you're a StarCraft pro is being predictable. So, on that same note, I suppose I would like to see ShoWTimE go for some more aggressive timing attacks as well. Although, recently, Zerg versus Protoss has become... It's become a bit of a... How do you best describe it? I guess it's become a bit of a meme. You know, it's become a bit of an interesting matchup. So most of the ladder heroes out there will probably be facing one of two Protoss build orders in this matchup. So first off, by the way, Serral needs to get this hatchery up before these adepts arrive. If he doesn't, that's actually a big problem. Yeah, he's not gonna get it. Brenda and Karen over here. Oh, he's gonna get it. All right, nicely done. Brenda and Karen over here shooing away these units. That does mean that the adepts could go into the main, but nice defense here by Serral. That was very tight. Like, if that was me, I probably would have not gotten the third base up, and then in the meantime, I would have lost 7 probes in the... or drones, rather, in the mineral line. Very easy to let that happen. Anyways, right, so most of the people on the ladder right now are facing one of two things. Either it's something super cheesy in the super early game. So, for example, a cannon rush or a proxy 4 gate or something along those lines. And then the alternative for Protoss seems to be on the ladder right now to just never really do anything and just max out on a Skytals-based army with Psionic Storm, right? So that's what most of the ladder heroes out there, aka 99.9% of the player base, that's what most of us are facing. At the pro level, that doesn't really work. Guys like Serral are going to be very good at late-game control with Zerg, right? As a matter of fact, I think a lot of people would say that he is the strongest late-game player in the world, although it's always a bit of a toss-up between him, and actually Dark has looked really good as well recently, and Rogue has got ridiculous late-game micro. Look at these. The Adepts actually managed to sneak into the natural. So what I'm trying to say is that in the late game, you're not going to get reliable wins as a Protoss player, or at least not as reliable at the highest level. So because of that, we see Protoss at the pro level still transition to a lot of mid-game play as well. That being said, though, it looks like ShoWTimE in this match is skipping that entirely. So he's gone Stargate into Stargate. This is a relatively popular build, but there's definitely also a lot of Robo follow-ups right now. So Protoss would open up at the pro level with a Stargate and then transition towards, for example, a Twilight Council and a Robo facility. Start some of that Archon Immortal Zealot Storm stuff up, right? And then a little bit later on, you transition back towards Skytles after the mid-game has ended. The alternative, though, at the pro level, is to skip that mid-game at least a little bit, but this does open you up to several different vulnerabilities. So there's one build that's making the rounds right now called the German Taxi. This is a build order that, there's like a couple of different varieties, okay? Yeah, so there it is, actually. Okay, I wasn't entirely sure what Serral was doing in this game anymore, but, he's going for 2 Dropper Lords. Now, this is a build order that was popularized a couple of weeks ago by a Lambo. And he called it the German Taxi because, well, he's from Germany and he's bringing the queens in a taxi towards the other side of the map. This is a pretty strong build order if you can get the queens on the other side, because the queens are some of the best units that Zerg can have at this point. Obviously, when you open up like this as a Protoss player, you won't have charge, you won't have immortals, you won't have, you know, you won't have a whole lot. You're definitely not gonna have Storm, for example. Oh, he needs to be so careful. Okay, keeps that Overlord alive with a Transfuse. I think that this is not a terrible situation for ShoWTimE because he's managed to delay it quite a bit already. But this is one of the varieties that's super popular right now and where Zerg players are winning a lot of the games. Now, there it is. The queens already ran out of transfuses, so Brenda and Karen that were inside of one of those balloons got picked off relatively easily. Great defense here so far by ShoWTimE. There's still 4 more queens inside of the OV. Oh my god, that's a little bit sloppy. Yep, that's a little bit sloppy. I don't think it really would have mattered because those queens probably wouldn't have made it home either. Or anyway. But I mean, losing a couple additional ones is not really necessary. Now, what Serral is looking to do here is to kill the opponent's 3rd base. And you know what? Even though the defense here by ShoWTimE has been good, I've got a feeling that that 3rd base will still get picked up if he decides to target it. There it is. There's also one Dropper Lord making the rounds. Oh, haha, through the main base, picks up a couple of the links. Just to, you know, maybe grab a couple more probes. Not bad at all. Nice moves here actually by Serral, all things considered, even after losing so much. But this is not necessarily a bad situation for ShoWTimE. I mean, you can see it on the supply count right now. Even though his 3rd base got the Knight, he got a whole lot of damage done. One of the corners that Zergs cut in these early games when they go for a build like this is that the creep spread is, you know, at least for Serral's standard, it's gonna be quite a bit weaker. But that's one of the varieties. There's the Warsaw subway as well that's been popularized by eLaser. I'm pretty sure he came up with that idea after he heard of the German Taxi. He says that well, at least he said that the German Taxi was not as good as bringing a Knight as Worm with the queens instead. This is real good though right now here for the Protoss. Look at this. He could just zap down the base, I think. He's decided to go after the queens instead. Does grab another one. Corrosive Bowl's very annoying here. I love the fact that Serral is defending this with queens. Yeah, so basically the last couple of minutes of this game are, like of game number 1, are what's going around the internet right now. I don't really recall specifically how we got to this position. Well, that's okay. Like, generally speaking, whenever I watch top-level StarCraft 2 on Twitch, for example, I probably do what a lot of you are doing right now. Where, you know, you're eating lunch or whatever, or you're like cooking dinner or whatever, right? Like, you're doing mundane things. Maybe you're folding laundry or ironing clothes, right? While watching me blabber onwards about really nerdy stuff, right? The odds are... That's how I most of the time watch StarCraft myself. So I don't really remember some of those specifics. I know some of you might be, you know, really into the game, though. It's my preferred way of watching StarCraft, but sometimes life gets in the way. Ugh. Anyhow, alright, so after the German Taxi failed... It crashed, sadly. Ooh, would you look at that? That's new, actually. This is a new thing that they've added. Look at that. I like it a lot. So you can not only see the resources lost here on the left, but you can also see the resources collected. And even though Zerg is, you know, looking pretty healthy as far as that goes, Protoss has gotten a 3rd base up right now pretty comfortably, right? Now, Dimawa is very good at just simply... you know, not dying to these kinds of attacks. Even though it wasn't perfect execution there by Serral, he's found himself in a pretty confident scenario where he can definitely consider, yeah, grabbing a 4th base here on the low ground. A couple of Zerglings are ready to do a run-by to watch this 3rd base, but look at this Wolof over here. He's making a Mawa. He's got a photon cannon, he's got a shield battery, he's got battery overcharge ready to go. And even though these Zerglings might try and sneak in, I've got a feeling that most of the Protoss army can go down towards the low ground. The same can be said right now for the Zerg though. Also moving down towards the low ground. There's a Hive coming up, there's a Lurker then coming up. Let's see. Alright. So I remember Serral talking about the fact that he doesn't seem to like Lurkers very much because it creates like stalemates more often than not. So the thing about the Lurker is that it kind of allows Protoss to very easily go into Skytoss. Because before those Lurkers are useful, you basically gotta get both of these upgrades, a Hive and a couple of Vipers. So you need a lot of gas in order to afford all of this, right? So only just now is when +2 missile starts up in favor of like a faster Hive and everything else, right? So Protoss has definitely got a nice timing attack over here, a nice opportunity to potentially go across the map and get some damage in. Now, Lurkers are pretty good defensively without the upgrades. Using them offensively, though, is going to be very tricky. Is there even detection here, actually, for the Protoss player? There's an Oracle here. Yeah, okay. I was going to say, he needs to see those Lurkers if he wants to deal with them, right? At the same time, it looks like the Prism actually managed to get into the main base. It snuck in, and it's going to start killing, well, whatever it can. Mostly just there as a distraction. Nice defense here, though, by Serral, as expected. There's the Revelation, so that's allowing this this group of Lurkers to be spotted. Corrosive Bowels once again connect. He seems to, like, oh my god, dude. His main defense... That's actually pretty... That's pretty insane. The fact that his main defense against against Void Rays is Corrosive Bowels there, it seemed. And that did the most damage. More so than the Hydras and the Parasitic Bomb right now. Yeah, it's pretty sick. Got a feeling if that micro was maybe a little bit better there by ShoWTimE, maybe he could have continued pushing. I mean, still some good storms on his way out, though. Oracle ends up going down there. But this defense is important at this point for Serral. Because now he's going to be able to properly transition towards that Hive tech, right? The one that he's been looking for a little while already. So probably we'll start up the secondary upgrade here in the Lurker Den very shortly. And he's already going to be jumping towards the 5th base as well. Now, would you look at that? After that mid-game push, you can see a lot of games could have already ended, right? After that mid-game push settles, it is the time for ShoWTimE to start chrono boosting out the attack upgrades right here inside of the Cybernetics core. So, Interceptors all benefit from those upgrades tremendously. So that's one of the reasons why you really want to be getting your carriers out with those upgrades as soon as possible. I would not even mind seeing a second Cybercore here pretty shortly, just so ShoWTimE can really start getting the big beefy boys out with maximum upgrades. 5th Nexus now being acquired on the right-hand side of the map as well. Serral does have a small hit squad over here. Now keep in mind, compared to what we saw back in the day, these are not upgraded Zerglings. So back in the day, we saw a lot of very powerful attacks. There's actually a Lurker drop coming up here as well. I love what he's doing here with these drop alerts. Really neat. Anyways, these units are pretty strong. The Hydras in particular. The Zerglings are a little eh. They're not nearly as menacing. Now he's trying to go past the vision range right there of that pylon, although I'm pretty sure ShoWTimE still picked up on that. Now Zerglings are pretty nice and fast. They're going to be able to get away pretty easily, but yeah, you kill the Nexus, you lose all the Hydras. Is that worth it? Probably not. At the same time, ooh, look at that. Great vision here by ShoWTimE. He sees the Lurkers, well, he sees the Lurker right now. He saw that there were units inside of an Overlord moving around the map, and, ooh, good feedbacks as well. My god, ShoWTimE is playing this really nicely here. Anyways, he's gonna need his detection over here to deal with that Lurker, but I've got a feeling it's not gonna be able to get that much work in. Alrighty. So slowly but surely we are transitioning towards strong late-game units. A couple of Spine Crawlers coming up as well to deal with any potential Zealots. Might need a Detector here in a little bit too, because usually in the later stages of a game, the Zealots will be replaced by some more slicey boys. Like, for example, of course, the good old... what's it called? The Dark Templar. Slicey boys is about as descriptive, though, as I can be, right? Like, that's not bad. Did he get himself the... No, he didn't. There's the speed upgrade as well for the Void Rays. Now, there's not that many Void Rays remaining. Don't know if it's worth it if you have 5 Void Rays, but... the speed upgrade inside of the Fleet Beacon is not bad at all. So these guys are heading towards the bottom left-hand corner. Couple of Lurkers over here as well. Ooh, Prism once again manages to sneak by. Couple of Spore Crawlers over here. Got a feeling, yep, abducted. There you go. That's a sweet little move. the same time, the roaches over here, a lot of them were killed, but they've kited back towards the safety of the lurk. And then also those spines. Even though the prism is gone, the majority of the Protoss army is still standing. 12 spore crawlers, by the way, are being produced right now here by Serral. So he's starting to get into that place where Protoss can't really attack into him anymore, right? It's very annoying for a Protoss to have to attack into this. Good storm over there. Softens up a couple of these units. A lot more spore crawlers are being built over here too, to basically create a another location where those spores can... Or sorry, like to create another like location where those Protoss units can't really engage very easily. And now we're getting into the point where... Like, what do you do at this point, right? If you're a Zerg player, are you gonna start fighting off the creep without your spore crawlers? No. As a Protoss player, though, are you gonna be fighting on the creep with the spore crawlers? No. As a Zerg player, do you want to be fighting where those static defensive structures are for the Protoss? Not really, no. And as a Protoss player, you don't really want to be fighting without them. So, it seems like this is the stage in the game where passivity is king. Like, basically, the player that attacks is the one that, you know, with their main army, is usually the one that's going to be in a less than comfortable position. Assuming your opponent is obviously also in position, right? Like, there's a couple assumptions to be made, but... Late game Protoss versus Zerg is, because of that, in my opinion, a bit of a meme. Most of it can be determined by income. So you can see there's a lot of attempted moves, right? Players are trying to get work done. But if everyone is real good at the game, it becomes very difficult to actually, you know, get the work in that you want to get done, right? So most of the time, even though these battles are nice to watch, most of the time, this is not really what determines... Oh, there's still some storms, okay. This is not really what determines the outcome of the game. The trades will probably be relatively even. Yeah, look at that. What's usually gonna determine the outcome of the game is not so much the resources lost, but the resources collected. So you can already see Serral is now acquiring an additional base here in the bottom left-hand corner. Top right has also been acquired right now by ShoWTimE. Both have got a very healthy amount of workers, and they're basically just trying to mine out their side of the map as fast as possible. Still putting on a lot of pressure on the opponent, though. There's the abductions once again. Missed feedbacks there by ShoWTimE. Oh, gotta be careful that you don't accidentally consume your own hatchery. That would be kind of stupid. By the way, I sometimes see like comments in the comment section down below. People complaining about Vipers and their abduction ability. For those of you unfamiliar, abduction is not really... Like, maybe this is some Zerg bias coming into the mix, okay? And I'll be the first to admit that. But technically speaking, abduction shouldn't really happen. Whenever you see an abduction happen, it kind of means that Protoss has done a misplay. The reason for that is that abduction range is shorter than feedback range. So High Templar should basically always be in a position... Like, they should be in front of the carriers. And they should be in a position to feedback the Vipers in time. It's either that or the fact that Protoss doesn't have enough vision to actually know where the Zerg army is coming from, right? So if you don't know where the Vipers are, then it's really difficult to feedback them in time. But usually, like for example, what we saw up there, I know some Protoss players out there are like, that shouldn't have happened. That was actually a misplay right there by ShoWTimE, getting those units abducted in the first place. Revelation being thrown around. Units in the bottom left-hand corner were cleaned up as well. So it's not as reliable as spell is what I'm trying to say, as a lot of people think it is. It's very difficult to get it done properly against good Protoss players. Now, I quite like this Hydra Lurker hit squad, though, that he's been going for here for a while. Since they can't outrange these photon cannons, the photons are slowly starting to take some hurt. ShoWTimE is actually being very active with this army. Most of the time, it seems that Protoss aren't very active with these kinds of units. He's actually in a weird state right now as well, where he can't really warp in units to defend against these lurkers. Ooh, for some reason, oh my god. Was that on purpose, you think? Oh, that was pretty sexy if that was on purpose. Wasn't expected by Serral, I can tell you that much. Yeah, so it's a weird position sometimes where you get attacked and you can't warp in reinforcing units because you're maxed out. So sometimes you just take a lot of damage because you have too much army sitting somewhere else on the map. Ultralisks are coming up right now. Now, Ultras are basically added into the mix to deal with those late game, you know, High Templar on the ground, right? So if you get Ultras underneath the Protoss Skytals and they can clean up all of the High Templar, then all of a sudden those Vipers can go in, right? And then all of a sudden the Hydralisk can also close the distance. So it's a really cool little mini battle in the late game of ZVP where basically both players are, you know, trying to get the most out of their spellcasters. And it's a cool dynamic. Like, it's a little mini game within the actual game that's going on. Once more. A Hydra Lurker hit squad. This is neat. Yeah. So it's only like 5 Lurkers, right? And like how many Hydras is that? Like 10? Maybe a dozen? It's not as many as you would expect. But this is basically like back when people used to go melee upgrades early on. This is, I guess, what has replaced that, right? Like back when people did that, you would go a lot of Ling Bane run-bys. I guess Ling Bane is no longer a thing, but Lurker Hydra is. And for those of you wondering, by the way, why Ling Bane is not so popular anymore in ZVP right now. I mean, you still see it from time to time, but it's not as popular anymore ever since they nerfed the Baneling damage to shields. So Carapace upgrades are definitely king against Skytals-based forces. So look at this long distance mining already. Trying to grab the expansion in the center. And you can see where this is heading, right? Even though neither player has really committed to a big fight yet, like you have to have both players commit to a big fight. We're gonna have to have a clash at some point in this game. If it's on top of photon cannons, Protoss wins. If it's on top of spore crawlers, Zerg tends to win. There's gonna be a point in this game, if it continues like this, where we're gonna have to fight on neutral ground, right? One big battle to determine the outcome of the match. I don't know how this one lurker got here, by the way. Like, I'm looking at it right now. Is there a... No, that's an overlord, but not a drop alert. I guess it walked in. Probably just walked in here. They're extremely good at harassing each other, by the way. Never really quite maxing out yet on, like, an ultimate army. Instead, always leaving some supply in the bank so you could actually go for some attack aggression, right? Here we go. The Ultralisks, besides being pretty beefy units that kill High Templar, they're also pretty good at just attacking the Protoss bases. Zerg needs to be concerned, though, with this army over here, yeah. That expansion in the bottom left-hand corner, 0 chance that one is gonna stay alive. There's quite a few spore crawlers up here. Serral thinking about coming in from the side. Love the fact that Ultras actually have found their way into this matchup, man. It's actually more common to see them right now in ZVP than in this area. Now, this is a nice engagement. Oof, okay. A lot of High Templar end up going down. ShoWTimE decides to... zap away from there, using his mass recall to teleport back home. It's a clutch decision. He ended up losing quite a bit more there than... like, Serral would have definitely won that engagement if they decided to fight. But yeah. Difficult situation to call. ShoWTimE is pretty quick on those zappy boys. So, yeah, the Ultras are primarily here to try and deal with the ground units. And once the ground units are eliminated, that's when the Zerg anti-air can really move in. Because the problem is, Corruptors, right? Like both... So your best anti-air units in the late game for Zerg are the Corruptor and the Hydralisk. And the Corruptor and the Hydra are both kind of weak against High Templar, right? Like they both just get wrecked by Psionic Storm. So it's a tricky scenario to be in. A couple of Brute Lords are coming up right now as well. Okay. Probably not the preferred unit, but I like it. Love the fact, actually, that we see now some of those speedy Void Rays coming up, too. So ShoWTimE is trying to establish his side of the map, right? So you can see right now that he has basically, like, if you were to draw a diagonal line on the minimap all the way towards this area, he's taken everything on his side. His main goal right now, knowing that in a late game, he trades either, you know, slightly more efficiently or relatively even. His main goal right now is to outmine his opponent. And historically speaking, Zerk has become really good at that. Or historically speaking, like, Zerk is the one better at that. But I've got to say, man, Protoss has gotten extremely good at these little hit squads. So this seems like a relatively easy move to make. But the thing is, right, you're always wondering when the Zerk army is going to be moving in all its might, right? And in order to, like, tie up 20 supply and units that aren't going to be able to help out in the main battle is very tricky. Like, it looks easy, and I can tell you that it's not. It's, like, you have, like, 80 supply or 70 supply worth of workers, right? So that's only 130 army supply left over. And if you're then going to commit, like, I don't know, 15 to 20% or so to units that aren't going to be part of the actual main engagement, that's huge. That's a lot. So you need to be very careful. On the flip side, though, those units are capable of indeed killing expansions. And they might very well allow you to eventually obtain the victory. Serral slowly dropping his drone count lower and lower as expansions mine out. He's adding on more and more spore crawlers. I like it. Ooh, he teleported. Oh my god. Teleported freaking Dark Templar on top of the lurkers. I love it. Man, I love high-level StarCraft. Couple of Brute Lords right now. Not the best unit in this matchup, but they can still be quite formidable. Immediately, once again, we see a similar hit squad. Wonderful moves here by ShoWTimE. We see that similar hit squad moving towards the bottom left-hand corner. Mothership finally comes out as well. Takes about 7.5 years to produce, but it'll be here shortly. Expansion in the center, while the Zerk is killing a base in the top right, will be picked off. This is, if you're a Protoss player and you're struggling in late game Zerk versus Protoss, this is what you need to be doing. Like, just maxing out on Skytoss is not gonna cut it. You need to reserve supply to also go for, like, multiple armies that are going around the map where you're playing the zoning game with the Lurkers and the Hydras or the Lings and the Banes or the Ultras and the Lings, whatever it is your Zerk opponent is going for. Super critical, and it's what ShoWTimE is showcasing brilliantly over here. And you can see, as he is establishing more and more expansions, he's putting up a lot of shield batteries and photon cannons as well, which is making this, harder and harder for the Zerk to push into. High Templar once again in the front. Nice move right there by ShoWTimE. Needs to try and grab all of those feedbacks before the fungal growth or before the abductions can come in. Now, I know there's also an ongoing joke that's been going on for... Hey, Banelinks. There's a joke that's been going on for a very long time in StarCraft 2, where people say that Protoss is F2A move in the late game. And I just want to go out and say that that is 100% not true. Microing this late game army is surprisingly difficult. I know it looks easy. Like, in order to play it at 90% efficiency, that's pretty easy, okay? Playing the Zerk army on the other end at 90% efficiency is very hard, right? Microing all of these different spellcasters and positioning the units properly is you know, much harder than controlling this Protoss army at the same percentage. That being said, if you want to control this Protoss army well, you need to have a separate hotkey for your mothership, because it's got a very slow turn rate, right? You need to make sure you have your High Templar ready to go. You need to make sure that you're positioning your Void Rays in such a location that you can actually start attacking those Corruptors efficiently. You need to, like, do a lot of things really well, and microing it takes, like, 4 or 5 different hotkeys. So, like, this is not something that is, like, F2A move, okay? Like, that's completely unfair to these high-level Protoss players. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of guys on the ladder that will do just F2A move, right? But just want to point out, for those of you that play Zerk, that get tilted every time you see this, that controlling this perfectly is extremely hard. You ideally also need to get a couple of Oracles here into the mix to use the Revelation there, right? And then the Tempests have to be on a separate hotkey. You need to activate Prismatic Alignment at the perfect moment. You might need to get the Archons underneath the Mothership as well, but the Mothership has to be on a separate hotkey, because otherwise it just gets abducted very easily, right? Like, there's a lot of small moves that might be a little difficult to spot, but it's by no means easy. I guess the frustration, though, for a lot of people lies with the fact that it's, you know, to play it at like 90% efficiency is much easier than playing the Zerg army at 90% efficiency. But at the highest level, that's basically irrelevant. Alright, so the battle for the bases. That is what we have gotten into. And you know what? ShoWTimE is trying to grab the base in the top right-hand corner, only to find that the Zerg has now established a hatchery over there. Those Brute Lords, while not very useful in main engagements, they have been an absolute disaster for ShoWTimE to deal with, because it's another it's another like siege unit, right, that Zerg has at their disposal. Nexus in the center ends up going down. Base in the center might also end up going down, though, if Zerg is not careful. Keep in mind, there's always Neural Parasite as well that you have to be worried for here if you're a Zerg player. Or if you're a Protoss player. Getting your whole army Neuraled is the last of your requests. That's where the High Templar once again come into the mix. So the High Templar really are the key unit here with Skytools, which is kind of ironic. Maybe we should call it High Templar Tools or something along those lines. But those bad boys with their capes and their floating sonic, whatever they do, right? They're the keys. They're the keys here. Like, just Skytools, just carriers, just Void Rays, just a Mothership, just a couple Tempest. Very easy to kill for Zerg. Zerg would just walk over it. It's the High Templar that are absolute king. So keep in mind here, Abduction does not outrange feedback. So, there you go. High Templar. Almost got picked off. At the same time, the Brute Lords and the Ultras and the Hydralisks. Look at this, man. Isn't that beautiful freaking StarCraft? Wow, there's another R. Oh my god, I love this. This is so cool. Call me a nerd, guys. That's okay. I'll be nerding out over StarCraft games for a very long time, I think. My god. Is it a sick game. Like, there's people out there, get this, that play other video games. What? Okay, actually, I play a lot of other video games too, but... StarCraft will always be my one true love, okay? As I've said many times, I'm polygamerous. I like to play multiple video games. But StarCraft is, you know, it's my partner. StarCraft and me are in an open relationship is what I'm trying to say. But I always come home, though. Don't worry about it. Alright, Ultras, Lynx, and Hydras. Top right-hand corner of the map. Protoss trying to re-secure the base in the center. But as the Protoss is moving it over towards the top right-hand corner to clean up those Ultras, you can see that the main of the Zerg army, or at least a couple of the Zerg units, are still being a nuisance over here. This expansion, though, this one over here, is not really worth defending anymore, to be honest. There's only a couple hundred minerals there. We're getting into mined-out map territory. This extractor over here, the high-yield one, has been mined out as well. Not the same can be said yet for ShoWTimE, who's already actually at a very healthy amount of gas. I really like it. If we look right now at resources collected, I love resources collected, man. Why is it taking so long since we've seen that? I don't think, by the way, that this is going to be a standard. I think it's only a TSL thing, but I would like it to be a standard. Like, this series was played during the Team Liquid Star League. So some of these replay features, yeah, pretty nice. Pretty awesome. Now, as the Protoss is trying to defend the base in the center, Serral is once again grabbing the base in the top right. You know what's funny? Like, this is when we have finally arrived at, like, a strategy game. Isn't that kind of ironic? Like, StarCraft is a real-time strategy game, but it's only, like, the strategy part of it is only relevant up to, you know, like, most of it comes down to execution and doing things really fast and really well, right? And really cleanly. Mechanics are huge. But strategy really is becoming a big part of the game right now, since everyone at this level has got great mechanics and great production and great game sense and really good execution and all the rest of it. It's taken a while before we got to the strategic part of the game, but we're seeing it more and more right now. I'm hoping StarCraft is still around, like StarCraft 2 that is, in like 10 years from now. I wonder where we're going to be at that point. Couple High Templars, a little too far forward. There's, by the way, also another hotkey here that Protoss has. There's a couple of prisms. High Templar are inside of those prisms, so you can deal with those. Zerk is actually starting to take control of this, though. Fatigue and you know, stamina is definitely coming into the mix right now as well. High Templar, ooh, sorry, the Infestors, they're kind of like the Zerk High Templar, I suppose. Almost ended up getting picked off there. You can see, though, that Serral has been heavily outplaying ShoWTimE here over these last couple of minutes. He's been killing a lot of bases. Well, not heavily, maybe, but he has been, in my opinion, outplaying it. That being said, I mean, these bases, I guess, aren't super critical anymore because there's very little mining. But the base in the center is still one of the ones that ShoWTimE needs to try and acquire. Serral expecting to be able to pick off a Nexus in the center of the map again. Finds out that there's no Nexus there to be killed. Base over here has still actually got quite a lot of gas in it. And I'm checking gases primarily because that's the most important resource. Love the fact that he's actually targeting the one gas geyser there first. We're getting to the point where the map is mostly mined out. Not a lot of resources can be acquired anymore. You can see both players are at a very low amount of workers. One of the High Templar ended up getting killed. We do see the big bubbles coming up right there from the mothership as well. Those time warps is what they're called. They reduce attack speed and movement speed by 50%. So they're basically a big I don't want to fight here bubble for Zerk. That's the TLDR of it. Back in the day it was only movement speed, but these days it's also attack speed. And 50% attack speed reduction is way too much to actually overcome. So Zerk players don't really want to fight into that circle. So we're at 38 drones right now for Zerk and 19 probes. Is this the engagement? I think this is it. Okay, here it is. This is the engagement a lot of people are talking about. Fungal growth goes down on all of the Void Rays, Parasitic Bomb as a follow-up as well. At the same time, these units were recalled towards the Nexus and Zerk decides to fight the majority of this Protoss army. Storms are going down. Mothership is currently without energy. All of the Corruptors spread out on top of all of those Protoss units. Prismatic Alignment was activated on those Corruptors though. And even though the entirety of the Zerk army seemed to have disappeared, the Protoss army is still looking mighty powerful. Now that's the engagement that people have been talking about for a little while. Could that fight have been any better there for Serral? I'll go back to it at the end of this game, okay? Just so you can look at it once more. Serral is currently spending his entire bank. Even though both players had a pretty big bank, I think they were up to like 10,000 resources or so, you can see that it's barely enough to remax, right? Like it's not even remotely enough right now for Serral to remax. He's going for a complete air-based army right now with queens and I guess a couple of infestors on the ground. It can definitely work out, but it's going to be very difficult to defend his bases right now, right? And obviously, harassing that expansion in the center is going to be near impossible. There are still some Zerglings, I guess. So maybe, I mean, Zerglings with Adrenal Glands and +3. These guys do not mess around. Yeah, they can actually kill a base really quickly. This was previously the task of a dozen or so Ultralisks, but look at that. Nice move right there by the finisher. Protoss does have to engage right now on top of Spore Crawlers if he wants to fight this majority of the Zerg. Look at the spreads right here as well to try and reduce the amount of damage that fungal growths and parasitic bombs can do. And there it is. ShoWTimE wins game number 1 after a pretty intense battle. So let's go back to that one. Okay, so let's watch this battle 2 more times. First off, we're going to be watching it from the Zerg's point of view, right? So, Zerg gets the perfect fungal growth right here on all of those Void Rays. They then follow it up with Parasitic Bomb on top of all of those Void Rays. That would have certainly, you know, gotten all of them killed. Protoss wasn't paying attention to their army. All of the High Templar are trailing behind. And the majority of the Skytools units are, you know, kind of just derping around. Not in the same space as those Void Rays are, right? Serral then decides to push the issue as he engages on top of all of those units over here. He gets the Ultras in the engagement first. they're going to be capable of killing a bunch of those Archons and they're going to be enabled to kill the High Templar then very shortly. And Serral at that point starts abducting all of the units, uses neural parasites here on the infestors to try and control this, and then he starts target firing down the Corruptors. Now, since most of the Archons here underneath this army are now gone, and he doesn't have to worry anymore about splash damage, he decides to fly all of the Corruptors on top of the Protoss units to start picking them off one by one. And one big advantage of this is that, say, for example, right, I don't know if there's a parasitic bomb here somewhere in the mix, but say the interceptors are chasing down all of those Corruptors. If you then parasitic bomb the carriers, right, and you fly the Corruptors back on top of the carriers, they will kill their own interceptors due to the parasitic bomb killing all of it. Now, since Serral doesn't know if there's any Archons remaining, he decides to split up all of those Corruptors to negate any splash damage, right? And he target fires down, at least to the best of his abilities, because he's still human, right? Some of these things. Now, I don't know exactly what APM was like for the finisher there during that engagement, but we can have a quick little peek. You can see that he is, you know, pressing close to 10 buttons or so a second. Now, the end result of this engagement is that he ends up killing a couple supply worth of Protoss units, and he loses basically everything there himself. Okay, now let's go back and watch this engagement from the Protoss' point of view, right? So this is when Protoss is using Time Warp over here in the top section of the map. He doesn't have energy anymore on the mothership. Imagine if he did have that during that previous engagement. That would have been absolutely crazy. But anyways, here's what ShoWTimE does. So ShoWTimE sends in the Void Rays, accidentally loses track of them, right? Because I guess, you know, fatigue and stamina is a real thing. But look at the reaction speed here, right? So fungal growth comes up, recalls right away, right? So that was about as fast as a recall you could go for, even though, I mean, if you're looking at this in an isolated instance, you know, you may say, okay, he had about 0.2 seconds, you know, to recall a little bit faster, but you got to be very quick with your thought process and also like with your, you know, clicking in order to actually recall all of those units, because otherwise you might make the problem or you might run into the problem that you don't get too much done. Another thing that ShoWTimE does extremely well is that he moves this army away, expecting these units to chase, right? Now, even though the units were recalled, they were recalled straight towards the third base. So Zerg starts off this engagement. However, the Corruptors join in basically around the same time as the Void Rays do as well. Mothership gets abducted, but the High Templar, they were indeed on the right-hand side of this fight. Plus, there's still a couple of them somewhere inside of this Warp Prism. Maybe if you could, like, I don't know, maybe if you could Neural Parasite the High Templar, but that's extremely difficult to pull off. So even though that wasn't the preferred engagement here for the Protoss player, he still very quickly thought on his feet and made the best of a pretty tough scenario. Now, a lot of Zerg players are looking at this and they're saying, okay, you know what? This proves that Zerg in the late game is just not as good against Protoss, because even though Serral has gotten close to the perfect engagement off, ShoWTimE still absolutely, you know, trashed that army. Now, I go back one more time just to, like, look at the beginning of this engagement once more so we can have a look at the actual army units that both players have, right? So this is as the Protoss player is zapping back towards the center of the map. At this point, there are 7 Ultralisks. 7 Ultralisks, and I think it's 16 Zerglings. Is that what we saw earlier? Where are they? Oh, there's 16 Zerglings right here on the production tab. Okay, so that makes 8 supply plus the cost right here of all of those Ultras in ground units that aren't really going to be able to help out right here against these Skytos units compared to the amount of ground units right here that ShoWTimE has. And I'm not really counting the High Templar into that mix because the High Templar are very critical, right? That is a lot of supply that's tied up in, you know, Zerg ground units. Secondly, Protoss at this point is at 19 workers, whereas Serral is sitting at 38, right? That's another 20 supply or so that ShoWTimE has in an army advantage. So, looking at this objectively, plus there's a couple Brute Lords too that aren't really going to do anything, right? Looking at this objectively, what it comes down to is that in, like, effective army supply, especially when you also add the queens into the mix, because those, like, Zerg still needs queens, we're talking about, like, 40 to 50 or so supply of more, or like 40 or 50 or so effective supply more here for the Protoss player. So, you can make of this what you want, but let me know down below in the comment section. I bet you forgot that this was actually a best-of-5 series, huh? Here we go. Game number 2. It will take place on Jagannatha. Nevertheless, though, looking at the end of that previous game, I do think it's a pretty obvious example as to why a lot of Zerg players are avoiding late game. Whether or not it's imba or not, I don't really want to get into that. I don't really want to pass judgment because, you know, like, up to a certain point, I do think that playing Protoss in the late game is easier than Zerg. But at the highest level, I don't know actually if that is true. Because the amount of things that Protoss needs to do in order to control that army well, and the amount of, like, split-second decision-making that you have to be able to pull off, I mean, it's so difficult, right? Like, I would probably be busy fat-fingering my High Templar out of the prism, trying to figure out where in the world they dropped on the ground before I cast any storms, right? Like, it's very, very hard to control that army well. So, StarCraft 2 is balanced from the top down. And the fact of the matter is that, you know, regardless of how the ladder is doing right now, and the ladder, for those of you wondering, it's like 45% or so, Grandmaster League that is, 45% or so of the Grandmaster League is currently Protoss. Protoss is barely winning any tournament games. As a matter of fact, even though there's only like, I think there's like 30 Zerg players right now in GM on Europe, Serral has got like 70+% win rate in his ladder games against Protoss. So it's extremely hard to talk balance when the game is you know, designed around the highest level of play. The balance is designed around the highest level of play. Protoss is underperforming at that level. However, it is overperforming at everyone below the highest level. Right? So, yeah, we'll see. One of the big things that could definitely shake this up is a new ladder map pool. So, the new ladder season will be starting off I think sometime later this month, so sometime in January. It's percentages that we're talking, right? It's percentages. There is no magical wand that you can wave to all of a sudden, you know, quote-unquote, fix a late game. Because if you were to change a couple of values here and there, I can guarantee you that it's gonna flip very heavily in favor of one of the two races. And, yeah, I hope at the very least, like, I'm doing a decent job here explaining to you why that is, right? Because it's complex. Like, I see a lot of people that are like, like, if you go to the StarCraft forums, there's people like, it's the Skytools, imba. If you were to nerf Skytools, Serral is gonna never attack you ever again, okay? He's just gonna sit back, max out on his Zerg army, and then, you know, you can't do anything. He's not gonna, like, if you're gonna nerf Skytools in the late game, Zerg is just gonna go back to defending, and then eventually overwhelming you, right? Likewise, if you decide to, I don't know, buff Zerg late game, the same effect will happen, right? And that doesn't take away, or that doesn't change anything about the fact that Protoss is still not winning a whole lot of tournaments. I mean, we had Trap winning an event not that long ago. But, I mean, yeah. If you look at it, at least over the last couple of years, historically speaking, Protoss has won barely anything. And most of the times that Protoss did win, for example, IEM Katowice back in 2020, that was won by a Protoss player. I think it was Stats, if I recall correctly. Was it Stats? I think it was. Anyways, doesn't really matter. That event was primarily won because, I mean, not to take anything away from the Protoss performance during that event, but builds were being played, like, for example, the Adept all-in, right? The 2-base Adept shenanigans that Protoss players were getting into at that point, just because Zerg wasn't entirely sure how to deal with that yet, right? So, it's tricky. It's very tricky. It's a very complex problem that is not so easily solved as a lot of people are trying to make it sound, at least when you dive into it a little bit more. Anyhow. By the way, I know that we've been discussing balance a little bit up to this point. I can imagine that the comment section in this video might turn into a bit of a minefield. Let's try and keep things at least somewhat civilized. I know it's easy to, like, look at the game only from your point of view. If you're a Zerg player, you might have very strong feelings, and if you're a Protoss player, you might have very strong feelings as well. Well, let's try and be at least a little bit more objective. Anyhow, let us have a look at where this game is currently at. So, 4.5 minutes. Lair has started up, Roachworn coming up, 2 gases here, as an additional gas being acquired there as well by the Zerg. In the meantime, on the Protoss end, we have the 3rd base being acquired, and we do now also see the Glaive follow-up. So, Glaives Never got nerfed, it just sort of fell out of favor. This is one of the follow-ups that we see right now from Stargate openers. So Stargate openers definitely very common. Void Rays are just really good as an overall unit. However, yeah, you can follow it up with another Stargate if you want to. You can follow it up with a Robo, but you can also follow it up with a Twilight Council and a bunch of gateways. One of the things that I like about this follow-up in particular from ShoWTimE is that you can hit a lethal timing attack that's going to catch a lot of Zerg players off guard, right? And you can deny all scouting. Like, you can make it so that Zerg literally can't figure this sort of thing out. So what is the tell right now that Serral is looking for? Well, he's trying to figure out how many gateway units there are. You can see that a lot of the adepts are being warped in kind of further to the back. So if Serral pokes up to the ramp over here or to the wall off, he won't be able to see all of those units. So he needs to be very, very careful now with the amount of drones that he produces. Massive stasis ward inside of the main base. So this is going extremely well so far for ShoWTimE. This build, pretty much unscouted, I'm pretty sure, up to this point, especially judging by the fact that there's a Hydralisk gang coming up, and that is really not what you need against an Adept push. That being said, though, Adept pushes like this are not nearly as strong as the conventional one where you skip the Stargate, just because it hits minutes later. So look at this. Even though Serral didn't see that this was going on until just a little bit ago, his production is looking pretty intense, and oh, that's why. Okay. I was wondering why the shade went over in that direction. Serral created a full wall off here at the front, preventing those adepts from shading in. I love this, actually. We barely ever see this. It's kind of like a shield battery in Zerg or in Protoss versus Protoss, you know, when you try to deny the adepts to go in. Yeah, look at this. He's just creating like a door. I like it. Is there going to be enough, though, for the Zerg player to push all of this back? Because a lot of adepts are still alive. The Queen's over here trying to get something done too, but I've got a feeling with minimal amounts of workers, actually only one drone has gone down so far in this game, Serral has managed to defend. And I think this is a perfect example of what I was talking about earlier. Like, not dying to stupid stuff. Serral was completely blindsided by this push, but then still, you know, defended it very smoothly. If you were to execute this exact thing that ShoWTimE just did against a weaker Zerg player, they would have probably had adepts in their mineral lines. You blink twice and there's like 30 drones that end up going down. Like, literally, that's not me exaggerating. You can do so much damage as a follow-up, but Serral's like, nah, it's fine. I'll just position my structures in the earlier game, make a wall off over here, you know, get the Queens into the battle. It's all good, man. Don't worry about it. He's already got the follow-up planned as well, apparently. During all of that, made an infestation pit and decides to go for the swarm host right now. He ended up canceling the Hydralisk den. Revelation over here by ShoWTimE, though. Very critical, but he's going to be... Yeah, he's going to be the defensive player right now. One of the downsides of opening up Adepts for Protoss is that they serve, like, no purpose past their original push, okay? Like, you don't really want to sacrifice them, but they're not really as good of an army unit. Like, they're nice to have, but they're not going to be zealots or, you know, some of these beefier attacking units. And they're definitely not going to be very good in straight-up battles. Now, even though there's swarm hosts coming up, yeah, looks like the fourth base would just be, not cancelled, killed. So that's 400 minerals down the drain. Bottom right-hand corner, we see the fourth hatchery now being acquired as well by the Zerg player. The Queens have also decided to start marching once again through the center of the map. But you can see Serral taking a different approach this time around. Or I guess not so much a different approach, it just didn't work out for him last game. He wants to see if he can get this game out, right? He wants to get this game done before, really nice landing actually there by the swarm host, before it can go to the later stages. And this is a theme in high-level StarCraft right now. Zerg players clearly not super comfortable playing late game. Whether or not it's Imba, I don't know, but he wants to get some damage in. Now this is a nice battle over here though. When the Locusts are on cooldown, these Protoss units don't mess around. That being said, I wonder if there's just a little bit too many Zerg units. Especially once the Swarm Host will once again be able to spawn their Locust Wave. Every single Protoss unit that dies right now is not going to be able to defend against these Locusts. Now this is good too, actually. ShoWTimE anticipating the movement over here. He's going to force the Locust Wave. Now he can back off. Nice place right there by the German. There's a Stasis Ward over here too, which I love. But I think Serral may have spotted it, so he lands the Locust here on the right. Or bottom. Bottom left. I don't know, man. It's confusing. And actually, with the Queens now gone out of this equation, would you look at that? ShoWTimE gets the Void Race back into the mix. Very good play right here by the German, even though his Adept push completely failed because it's Serral. Okay. No reliable anti-air here. It's starting to become a little bit scary. Yeah, he's just getting queens at this point. Okay, so I think many a Zerg player would have already panicked and added in Hydralisks here, but not going to be the case. There's another Locust Wave. Picking off a couple units at once. Not too many, though. Serral, though, is approaching maxed out state. It's a little bit deceiving, though, with the Swarm Host, because Swarm Host Roach Ravager is the most supply-heavy army you can make as a Zerg. But yeah, this is a very, very scary force, and ShoWTimE is still only sitting at 84 supply right now when it comes to his army. That's not a whole lot. Roaches and Ravagers now used as a zoning mechanic as well. This is going to force the Void Rays to be recalled towards the main base, but the Roaches notice the recall and decide to walk on over to the natural expansion instead. I've got a feeling that this Cyber Core is going to go down. Now, this is a bit of a risky move. Serral baiting the Protoss actually to the safety of their own natural expansion. Roaches are going to town there over in the mineral line, but I think the main thing to look at right now are these Swarm Hosts at the front. Serral doing a phenomenal job right here, zoning his opponent away. The Queens now finally get the engagement that they're looking for, and the Void Rays will be picked off. One Immortal gets rallied straight into all of those Roaches and Ravagers. And even though there is some damage going on the other side of the map, I've got a feeling that these Warpins over here of those Zealots may have very well be needed on the other side. And indeed, it is going to be Serral who obtains victory in game number 2. Alright, game 3, we find ourselves on Oxide. There's quite a lot of variety right now for Zerg in the mid game. So you can go Roach Ravager, you can go Hydra Ling Bane, Roach Ravager Ling Bane, you can go Roach Hydra, you can go, you know, German Taxi, you can go Warsaw Subway, you can go Proxy Hatchery. I mean, I guess that's early game. You can go Swarm Host, you can go Mutas. Zerka's got about a gajillion different tools at their disposal in the mid game. And even though they're not all viable in all scenarios, it's pretty cool, right? It's pretty cool. Let's see how ShoWTimE is feeling after this. Do you want to play in a best-of-5 series? Do you want to be playing 5 games of that late game, you know, stamina draining kind of match? I'm not sure, man. It ended up working out for him quite well in game 1, but playing 5 of those must be absolutely exhausting. So I wonder what his goal is. Probe was sent across the map very early, by the way. Just to force the third base to be taken rather than the natural. This is fine for Zerg. Doesn't really do too much at the highest level, it seems. Most of the Zerg players are just fine taking their third base rather than their natural expansion. One of the big advantages, actually, of taking the third base over your natural is that you can't really be cannon rushed. I mean, it sounds obvious when you think about it a little bit, right? But one of the advantages of cannon rushes usually is that you can not only just kill your opponent's natural, you can also contain them on one base. So if Protoss decides to cannon rush the third right now, Serral doesn't give, you know, he doesn't care. So this kind of always leads to a macro game. I do think that if you're going to block your opponent's hatchery as a Protoss player, you should pretty much always follow this up with some sort of timing attack. I'm personally fond of the Adept follow-up. Just because when you think about it, right, like the Adept follow-up here is... It's strong because Zerg is not going to have their bases connected nearly as nicely, and they're going to be able to... You know, taking the natural is going to be... It's going to be kind of late, and yeah, it just gets the queens shuffling all over the screen. I do think that an Adept follow-up from this kind of move is good, but ShoWTimE decides that he doesn't want to die to stupid stuff, so he makes a Stargate instead. There's the other follow-up, actually, that's rather popular, especially over in Korea, it seems, where links are just flooded through the center of the map after this. So basically, this Adept will be, or sorry, this probe will be killed very soon, right? And, nice denying right there of scouting intel. Once that probe is gone, Protoss is going to be blind for a bit. So you could make non-stop Zerglings right now and just push right when link speed finishes. And just try and brute force your way through the wall over here. All you really need to kill at that point is like one Adept most of the time. Link speed is going to finish very soon. If you can overwhelm this one Adept over here and it can't get home, you can get a lot of work done. Keep in mind, ShoWTimE doesn't know that there's a natural expansion, so he's got to keep everything in mind and decides because of that to go for the Void Ray. Void Rays are good not only to, you know, transition towards the mid game, but they're really good at killing your opponent's roaches, cleaning up Zerglings, denying scouting with the Overlords, and you know, allowing you to defend at home while simultaneously being able to take a third. Like, there's a lot of advantages to going for the Void Ray opener over anything else. At least if you compare it to, for example, like Twilight Council into, I don't know, Archon drops or something, which was what was popular back in the day. This is just a safer way to open up to make sure you don't die to stupid stuff. Feel like that's been a theme in this game so far on this series. Once again, 4-minute third base here. At least that's what he's aiming for. If you're a Protoss player, that's always a nice number to compare. If you're thinking, okay, when do I take my third base? Just remember, most of these top-level guys are taking theirs at like 4 minutes. Maybe sometimes 5, but 4 minutes is actually a pretty common timing. You'll notice, though, once you take it at 4 minutes, you literally have like 3 Adepts and 1 Void Ray. You're like, what if Zerg just makes literally anything? It's scary. But that's kind of how Protoss functions at this level. You need to, yeah, you have razor-thin margins. If you want to stay up to speed right here with the Zerg's eco, you need to get something done. Building positioning over here is huge too, by the way. So right here, for example, that Adept is going to be able to stop like a half a dozen Zerglings easy peasy. Already though, look at that. Overlord speed is coming up. 4 additional Overlords are coming up. Roachborn is going to finish very soon. I've got a feeling that this might once again be some Zerg aggression. You don't just make 4 Overlords at this level of play and then just, you know, have them hanging out. I think that this is going to be some aggression once again here from the Zerg. There it is. The German taxi. Good scout there, though, by ShoWTimE. ShoWTimE is super good at scouting. Alright, so, bunch of Dropalords are coming up. Another Dropalord actually over here on the right-hand side of the map, too. So, even though the Queens... Oh, this is actually really neat, too, by Serral. So, he's distracting... Since he got spotted, right? He's distracting these 2 Void Rays with those 2 Dropalords that he's got. However, then in the meantime, there's a bunch of Zerglings heading towards the main base. And if all of this Protoss army is out on the map or hanging out at the third base, which is the most likely location where these units are heading, these links can actually get some damage done quite well into the main base. Alrighty, let's have a look. So no easy snipes this time around here by the Zerg or by the Protoss. Yeah, not having an Overload over here actually is a little bit annoying, but Brenda can keep marching. That's quite a few probes that end up going down here pretty easily. Nice pickup once again, gets one out of there. Keep in mind, what Zerg is trying to do here is kill the third base. Prismatic alignment, battery overcharge is still available here for the Protoss. Wouldn't mind seeing that come up here. Although there's only 1 shield battery remaining there. Yeah, there it is. This is the problem when you go for those razor-thin margins, right? And you go for a very quick base. These Zerglings over here are also preventing additional damage right here over at the third base because they're forcing the warp-ins in the natural. Look at this, man. Serral is running circles around his opponent here with this freaking Overlord. Awesome plays right there by the Night King. Do we still call him the Night King? I don't know. The Night King was kind of disappointing. Serral is not. Look at these Queens as well. Purposely saved up energy on those for quite some time. Third base is gone. Keep in mind though, Zerg doesn't really have a lot of eco. They essentially have 2 base economy here as a follow-up. So he needs to get more damage done ideally than this. Zerglings once again sneak in. Very cautious play here so far by Serral. He's droning now behind though and making additional Queens at home as well. The shield battery should still be powered by that pylon in the back. So at the very least that's still available, but corrosive balls are now going to be in range. And since there's so many transfuses here built up over the last couple of minutes, these units have so much energy available as well. Most of the Roaches and Ravagers will probably be cleaned up, but we're now getting into the territory where Protoss is going to be knocked back to the Stone Age, right? Even if he defends this, I think that his best move at that point is just to go for an all-out assault, but I don't know if I like that too much. Serral, in the meantime, sitting at 63 workers, already planted down the Hydra Den. He's going ranged first on those Hydras as well, so they're going to be ready to go to deal with any counterattack aggression. Now here's one probe, already heading on over to the third base as all of this gets cleaned up, but ShoWTimE is up with his back against the wall. The question is right now, how much damage can he do with these counterattacking voids? So there's 9 of them. That's a lot of Void Rays, actually. Good control there by the Maua. Couple additional queens. These Hydras are going to be super critical. I think he's got enough. Yeah, I think he does. Whew. Alrighty. You know what? Supply-wise, this is not so bad. It's just that most of the Protoss supply over here is not that good. Like, these are badly bruised Void Rays and a bunch of Adepts and, like, Zealots without charge. It's... Ugh. I'm not sold. There's no glaives on any of these units, no Twilight upgrades. Zerg is going to finish up the speed upgrade here shortly, and that's when the Baneling Nest comes into the mix as well. So Banelings definitely still have their place when your opponent doesn't have Archons, right? Or other big, beefy units with shields. Turns out Banelings are a pretty good idea. Fourth base here, probably not going to happen. Well, do I say that? Oh, well, this is... Oh, got to be very careful here. Yeah, that's the Protoss. Looks like the fourth base actually will stay alive. Third base still available too. We do see the Oracle actually getting 11 kills right now, but there's nothing in the wall. So once again, Zerglings stream in. At the same time, the Adepts actually... Ooh. I was thinking maybe they could get on top of all of these Hydralisks. They deal bonus damage against light, right? And Hydras are light. Spore Crawler uprooted from the third base. Joins the battle as well. There's a lot more units, though, coming up here for the Zerg player. And Protoss, generally speaking, needs to be crushing these kind of battles for it to be efficient. Prismatic Alignment gets activated against Queens and Hydras to make the beam thick, but it's not enough. There it is. GG is called and Serral wins game 3. Alrighty. Match point here for the finisher. Playing a variety of strategies so far, but he seems to be fond of the Queen drop. It's a neat little build. Very strong, especially if the opponent is going for the Void Ray opener. What downside, I guess, of going Void Rays? I mean, I've been talking a lot of strategy so far in this video, but I guess it's fine, right? One of the downside of going Void Rays is that, you know, if you compare it to an Oracle, you're not likely to get nearly as many drone kills. Like, if you open up triple Oracle, you're basically always going to pick off a couple drones here and there. Or if you open up Phoenixes, for example, right, you're basically guaranteed to get some worker kills at some point. But the Void Ray is, yeah, it's reliable, but also not nearly as threatening to a Zerg. Okay. So once more, good old standard builds here from both of these players. This is the gold standard for pretty much everyone right now. So when you see the 20 hatchery, or sorry, when you see the hatchery right now on the low ground for Zerg as a Protoss, you're like, okay, that's perfect. I can go for my own 20 supply Nexus and then follow it up with a Cybercore. It's always a bit of a debate whether or not you should go Nexus first or Cybercore. But generally speaking, if you see your opponent is going for the hatchery on the low ground, you go 20 supply Nexus, then 20 supply Cybercore. If, however, you see your opponent is going pool first, you go 20 supply Cybercore and then 20 supply Nexus. If you see they're going super aggressive, though, you go 20 supply second gateway, 20 supply Cybercore. And then you start making a Zealot as well, and then you expand a little bit later. But small moves that have become very normal over the years. Ooh. Could have maybe killed that probe, but Serral decided, okay, no. I'll let you live for the time being. You never really know. Units can be quite slippery. Second pylon inside of the main base here. Wait, no. Oh! I autopiloted there thinking there was going to be a second pylon inside of the main base, but that's not the case. Second pylon is not inside of the main base, but it's out on the map. So it's a location that Zerg is not likely to scout. Warp Gate starts up and the Twilight Council gets proxied. Now when there's smoke, there's fire, right? I've got a feeling it's not just going to be a Twilight Council. I find this a very brave move against someone of the caliber of Serral. Because Serral's map vision is pretty insane. If he gets a Ling in right now, I mean, it's game over. He's going to find the structure. It's pylon counting at this point for Zerg, right? So if he were to get into the main base at this point, he could literally just, yeah, chill for quite some time. Now, luckily here for ShoWTimE, the second Overlord got planted on a pillar rather than sent across the map to scout. So Serral isn't going to get much of an intel here. Oh my god. If only these little Zerglings knew. Oh, it is going to be Glaives. Okay. I thought it was going to be a Dark Templar follow-up or something along those lines, but So the advantage of doing this on this side of the map... My god, this is so risky. The advantage of doing it over here, obviously, is that you can warp in units closer to the battle. So even though it only makes like a 10-second difference as far as execution goes... My god, this is so risky. Serral, you could easily see this. It makes a small difference, but that difference is noticeable at high level. Because once again, the margins are very, very small. So Serral's not going to start producing units until the absolute last possible moment. But this is starting to feel a little bit unnecessarily risky. Look at the patrolling here of these Zerglings as well. Okay, so Oracle should have arrived already if it was an Oracle. It's not an Oracle. We see 2 Adepts at the front, Stalker as a follow-up as well. This is not something that ShoWTimE has done so far in this series. A couple Adepts were warped in over in this location as well. 3rd base was acquired in the previous games at the 4-minute mark. And Serral has got a unit patrolling over at the 3rd bases here for a bit already. So you can see he's adding on more units. Roachwarren also made much earlier this game rather than the previous one. So in the previous games, he kept going for a 430 Roachwarren. In this case, okay, giving up the 3rd base, I like it. That being said, though, even though he's making all the right moves, I don't know if this is that... do you want to commit there? Oh, apparently you do. I don't know necessarily if that is the best move, because that's still a lot of Zerglings. But I guess on the ramp, the service area is negated quite nicely. Now, you can shade on over to the 3rd base, but there's no drones to kill over there. So he decides to cancel the shade and try to go after the drones instead of the main. Couple kills so far, but once again, Serral doing some wonderful micro there on those units. Queen can get transfused. Nicely done. Immortal now as a follow-up. Reinforcing units now also heading on over to the bases. But I actually think abandoning the 3rd base there was really clever by Serral. It might seem obvious when you're playing the game, but it doesn't seem that obvious. So his only thing that he needs to do right now is defend this shenanigans, right? Protoss can't really give up on this position, because if they give up on this position, they lose all of this, and that's too much. So, this is ShoWTimE's one shot. Will he capture it, or will he let it slip? Yo, his palm spaghetti. Knees weak, arms are sweaty. Something like that. His palm spaghetti was definitely accurate, though. His arms are heavy, knees weak. No? He's got vomit on his sweater already. Mom spaghetti. There it is. All right, we're close. 3rd base is going to get killed, but I think that's fine. A couple of Lings ran around. Ooh, if they can get an Immortal. Yeah, they're going to be able to get an Immortal. Massive. Ooh, well, I mean, yeah, they got one. Still a lot of Zerglings end up going down, though. The thing is, though, Serral's not interested anymore in making that many Lings. He just wants to make Roaches and Ravagers right now. Starts up an Evo over here, too. Wouldn't be surprised to see another wall up going up. There it is. Adepts tried to shade in. Not gonna happen, buddy. Queen's in the front, soaking as much damage here as possible. They've got some energy for transfuses too. So Brenda and the entire crew will be able to defend just fine. The Zerglings are used to counterattack. And you know what? These structures are starting to take a lot of damage. If the Robo facility falls... Oh my god. Oh my god. Serral, you're so freaking good at this game, man. Like, that was a ballsy move there by ShoWTimE. And he managed to pull it off, but then Serral still just makes the right decisions very quickly. It looks easy, but... it's not. So, if you counterattack at this point, right, with the Zerglings, you're gonna have to bite yourself through a wall, but... once again, dude, I love this! Why do we not see this? Like, we barely ever see this. I like it a lot. So you can cancel that Evo again, and... even though the 3rd base is gonna be acquired over here, I don't know if you even need that, to be honest. ShoWTimE actually does have the superior economy right now, though, so it's not to be underestimated, actually. Now, once again, like I said earlier, these Adepts are not really going to be that useful in big battles. They're okay in big numbers against Roaches, but now you've got like 20 of them left over, and... as the Zerg army grows, it's going to be less and less useful. Dark Shrine comes up and 4 additional gateways. Alright, so ShoWTimE is doubling down. He's putting all of the eggs in one basket. It's a fragile little basket, but there's still hope. Once again, as soon as the Zerg army sees the Protoss units shading forward, the Evo chamber goes up. And you know what? If all Zerg players start adopting this freaking Evo chamber wall off, I'm pretty sure that no one's gonna go Adept Openers anymore. What a sexy little move. Yeah, just leave the drone over there. Just like you do with Protoss versus Protoss. It's just one drone. It's not that big of a deal. Now, Lara is very late, and there are a bunch of DTs. Where are the DTs? Over here. There's no detection. There's one Spore Crawler. Oh, no, there's 3 Spore Crawlers somewhere. Oh, there's one over there. Okay, well, did I not see this one? I was looking in the natural. Pretty sure it was right there on the right-hand side of the screen the whole time. Anyhow. This one is not super useful, though. Oh my god, the drone, actually. Ooh. Managed to get some work done. Spore Crawler moving back home. Queen's now using that transfusion energy as well on the hatchery. Great surface area blocking right here by Serral. And you know, I can't even see the units. Oh, yeah. You couldn't see the unit there for a long time. Somehow, some way, finds time to micro these Zerglings as well. The drone surround an adept. Or, sorry, a DT. That's 7 of those guys going down. You know what? The drone count is starting to, yeah, it's starting to plummet. 11 drones is not to be underestimated. Third base was made during all of this, by the way. I don't know how. But it's there. Alrighty. So are we just gonna go into a normal macro game now? I dig it. I talked about it earlier, right? Losing all of these structures would kind of suck. Well, they're gone now. Doesn't seem like ShoWTimE is in that peculiar of a position, but it is now him stepping aside, right? Serral is in the driver's seat. Where are you gonna go from here? It's gonna be Banelings and Baneling Speed, together with Roaches and Ravagers. Oh, there's a second Twilight Council. Okay. Lingbane, Roach, Ravager. Do I like it? I'm not sure if I like it. It's good if you have a superior economy to your opponent, but that's not really the case right now. I would have not minded him going back to the Swarm Host style. Like Roach, Ravager, Swarm Host, I think would have been better here. Even a Spire follow-up is not a terrible idea. Although probably a little too risky. Alright, well, anyways. Roach, Ravager, Lingbane. Serral's got a supply advantage. Most of that supply is in army. He hasn't really made drones here in a bit, so... This is essentially his all-in. He's going for the 4th hatch. I mean, not really an all-in, but he needs to get damage done. Great spread right here on these units already. Bailing's not very common, so how much practice does ShoWTimE have against this shenanigans? Centrifugal Hook's only 10 seconds away from finishing, so it's not done yet. Not a whole lot of force field energy, actually, on these sentries, so that is worth noting. Adepts try to see if maybe they can get something done, but Serral decides to back off. Once again, the wall-off, bro! I love the wall-off! Why is no one doing wall-offs? This drone is the real MVP of this battle. Alright, so with the adepts being cleaned up, it looks like Serral might want to commit here. This feels like a very dangerous engagement. Alright, well, the Banelings, ooh, eventually they do come rolling through. Oh, he's all out of force field energy. Yeah, since those those sentries got warped in ridiculously late. They didn't have a lot of energy. And Serral is just gonna start brute forcing his way through all of these Protoss units. I was questioning it, but I guess I shouldn't have. Well, great corrosive bounce right there on all of the overseers as well. But Serral indeed ends up winning this series in a 3-1 favor after that epic macro game in game number 1. Let me know your thoughts on this series down below in the comment section. Let's try and keep it at least somewhat civil, okay? Today, I want to give a special shout out to the Patreon supporters. Thank you very much for all of your generosity. But for now, I want to thank you for watching. Have an awesome day. Don't forget to smile. I will see you once again in the next one.